In 1947, somewhere under the Vatican, a courier from Egypt delivered pages that should have stayed buried. Vatican basement, late 1940s, crates from Egypt. Cloth-wrapped fragments carried down to a vault, 17 levels beneath the public archives, into rooms built for silence. And those fragments made a far more dangerous claim. The night before the arrest, Jesus gave a sound to a hidden circle. Not a sermon, not a prayer, a sound, one vibration. Something that, according to later streams, was given to an inner group around the 13 because it hit the body directly and opened contact without permission from the structure. That is not the kind of thing institutions lose. That is the kind of thing they bury on purpose. A scandal can be managed, a text can be edited, a name can be erased. A vibration is harder. It leaks. It echoes. It survives people. You can burn shelves. You can lock paper in a vault. You can argue over translations for 2,000 years and still miss the point. Frequency is a different problem. It slips through memory. It hides in ritual. It survives in the body long after the explanation is gone. And once you start seeing that pattern, history stops looking clean. It starts looking like a cover-up with really good lighting. So no, this is not just another lost scroll story. This is about a thing that may have survived precisely because it could not be stored only in ink. And if this kind of subject keeps pulling you in, subscribe now and stay close, because this one goes deeper than it looks. I'm not talking about fate, I'm talking about recognition. Some subjects do not feel new, they feel remembered. This is one of them. Not casual curiosity, more like your body catching the pattern before your mind can file it away. I know how that sounds. I had the same reaction at first. Part of me thought this might be one of those topics that feels huge from far away and turns into smoke the second you touch it. But the opposite happened. The deeper I went, the more stubborn the pattern got. It kept showing up in places that should not have lined up this cleanly if it was all just decorative mysticism. And that is where breath enters the story, because breath is the first clue that this teaching was never meant to stay abstract. Breath is strange when you really stop and look at it. It runs on its own, but you can also take hold of it. It belongs to the body, but it changes the mind fast. It sits right on the border between survival and awareness. That is why so many inner traditions keep circling back to it. Not because breath is trendy, not because slow breathing makes nice wellness content, because breath is the bridge. It is the one thing you are doing all day that belongs to both worlds, body and attention, flesh and awareness, matter and something just beyond matter. The old claim is brutally simple. Breath plus sound becomes direct access with no middleman, or even cleaner than that. Breath plus sound gives contact without permission, no priest, no gatekeeper, no structure deciding whether you are worthy today, just body, attention, vibration, and the possibility that the channel was built into you from the start. That is dangerous if your whole system depends on mediation. That is dangerous if power needs you to believe the sacred is always somewhere else, always behind a desk, always locked behind a role, a ritual, or a title. And once you see that, the old Gnostic categories stop sounding dusty and start sounding weirdly current. Hillik is surface life only. Scroll, react, consume, repeat, eat, compare. Numb out. Repeat again. Always on the surface. always one notification away from becoming somebody else's mood. Psychic sees more, feels more, questions more, but still gets dragged around by fear, approval, old wounds, and the exhausting need to look right. Then pneumatic, and this is where people usually ruin it by turning it into chosen one talk. I don't think that is the point. Pneumatic is the part that cannot stay asleep inside a polished lie. Not superior, just harder to sedate. The kind of person who can function in the world, sure, but never fully buys the world's fake version of itself. The kind of person who feels, over and over, that something underneath all this is real and buried and worth finding. If you are still here listening to something like this, chances are you know that feeling. Maybe you would never call it divine spark. Fine, call it the part of you that refuses to go fully numb. Same thing, less ceremony. And once you frame it that way, the older texts stop feeling like museum material. They start feeling close, a little too close, honestly. Especially once you move into Thomas, James, John, and the whole mess around Logos, because the problem was never just bad translation. It was flattening, reduction, domestication. In the beginning was the word sounds neat in English, clean, safe. But Logos is not just a spoken word. It is pattern, organizing force, the thing that gives reality shape. More like structuring intelligence than a sentence, and once that lands, the whole argument changes. The point is that reality may answer vibration before it answers belief. That is a much bigger claim, and a much less controllable one, because now truth is not just something you agree with. It is something you enter, something you resonate with, something your body may register before your theology catches up. That is why the hidden material keeps circling around the same strange images. A voice that is not really a voice, a name without letters, a sound carrying meaning before language can get its hands on it. I know, the first time you hear that, part of your brain rolls its eyes a little. Mine did too. You start wondering whether you are reading buried insight or one step away from a guy in a robe telling you quartz has opinions. Fair concern. But the deeper point holds. Across traditions, the same idea keeps returning. The deepest layer cannot be fully captured in language because language comes after it. Speech is downstream. Vibration comes first. And once you see that, the Jesus question shifts hard. The public layer gives you teachings for the crowd, parables, moral instruction, symbolic acts. Fine. But the hidden streams keep implying another layer under that. Direct teaching, private transmission, inner circle instruction. Not because secrecy is automatically holy, not because exclusivity makes things feel important, because some teachings break the second they hit mass psychology. Some things do not survive the crowd. Ego grabs them, politics flattens them, institutions weaponize them. Some streams stop at 12, others imply a harder inner ring. One version points to 13 present, 3 unable to hold it, 10 remaining with the instruction. Literal or symbolic, the pattern is the same. Not every teaching survives contact with the crowd. And if there really was a practice that gave direct access to the divine without institutional control, that would not be a side note. That would be the threat. Then empire does what empire always does. Constantine needs cohesion. Nicaea needs uniformity. Mystery becomes inconvenient. Ambiguity becomes dangerous. Institutional mediation becomes the law of the land. And the teachings most likely to get pushed out are exactly the ones that make the structure less necessary. That logic is not complicated. It is brutal, but it is simple. Power does not panic over nonsense. Power panics over anything that makes itself unnecessary. So, over time, the canon tightens. Stranger texts get sidelined. Practices become metaphors. Contact becomes doctrine. Direct access becomes obedience. A living method becomes a story people argue about. And after enough generations, most people assume the trimmed version was always the whole thing. It almost never is. This is also where the archons stop sounding like antique monsters and start sounding like modern life with better branding. In the old language, archons are ruling forces tied to the false order of the world. Fine. Keep that if you want. But even without a supernatural frame, the concept still lands hard. Archons are patterns that keep consciousness pinned low, systems that feed on fear, loops that keep people reactive, divided, exhausted, and easy to steer. Not horns, not theatrics, just a mind kept noisy enough to mistake reaction for identity. A consciousness pinned low becomes readable, steerable, and profitable. That is the trap. And once you see it that way, it gets almost uncomfortably obvious. Outrage spreads faster than clarity. Shame keeps people obedient. Despair makes people passive. Constant, low-grade anxiety weakens inner signal. People stop being able to tell what is actually their thought and what got slipped into them by a machine, an institution, a panic cycle, or an old wound using their voice. That is archonic, whether you picture entities, systems, algorithms, or the plain ugly mechanics of mass psychology. And why do structures love that state? Because scared people comply. Divided people do not unify. Exhausted people do not question much. People trapped in permanent threat mode become easier to herd and easier to sell to, which is a brutally efficient combo if we are being honest. This is where the whole idea of a frequency threshold starts making sense, as long as you do not turn it into glittery nonsense. Forget the cheesy version. Think practical. There are states where you are easy to run, and states where the whole trick becomes visible. When you are flooded, you are steerable. When you are calm enough, anchored enough, clear enough, the bait starts looking like bait. The hook shows, the seam shows. You notice when something is pulling your fear instead of speaking to what is clear in you. That is what it means to move above a certain frequency in any grounded sense. Not levitating, not becoming magical. Just becoming hard enough to run that the old hooks stop landing the same way. And then you get to Sophia, which for me is where this whole thing stopped feeling like old religious theater and started feeling personal. Sophia is usually called divine wisdom, sure. But the deeper point is that Sophia is what happens when consciousness falls into separation and forgets its source. She descends into lower reality. She gets tangled in a broken order. She becomes fragmented, disoriented, cut off. That is not just mythology. That is half of modern life with better symbols. That is what it feels like to live too long inside noise, performance, pressure, comparison, and false urgency until you cannot remember what your own center feels like anymore. In some streams, Sophia does not return through argument. She does not get back by memorizing doctrine. She releases a sound, a raw vibration, something before language. Some traditions describe it like a hidden name, others like a primordial vowel, others like shama, or the sound beneath speech. Call it what you want. The label matters less than the pattern, because the pattern keeps coming back. Remembrance arrives as vibration before it arrives as explanation. That is the point. And once you really get that, Sophia stops being some distant mythic figure. She becomes a mirror. If Sophia is wisdom fallen into matter, then the divine spark in each person is not just a poetic metaphor. It is the part that still remembers even when the personality does not. Which is why this teaching does not feel like ordinary learning. It feels like recall. It feels like hearing an old signal through static. I think a lot of people know that feeling. You read a line, hear a phrase, try a practice, and instead of thinking, wow, what a brand new idea, you get this strange inner click. Like something in you has heard this before. That matters. Because ideas can be borrowed, real recognition cannot. And this pattern is not locked inside one tradition anyway. Versions of it show up everywhere under different names: primordial sound, unstruck tone, hidden name, breath syllable, original vibration, different maps, same pressure point. That does not prove every claim. I'm not saying it does. But it should at least stop people from dismissing it with lazy confidence. Too many traditions keep circling the same thing. Sound is not decoration. At the deepest level, it may be structure. So let's bring this down to the body, because if this stays only in theory, then it is just fascinating wallpaper. The practice itself is almost offensively simple. Find a place where you can be alone for a few minutes. Nothing ceremonial required. No props. No performance. Honestly, the less cosplay energy, the better. Sit or stand. Posture is not the main point. Just do not collapse your chest and do not force the breath. Rest the tongue gently against the roof of the mouth just behind the front teeth. That detail shows up in too many traditions to ignore. A lot of them treat it like closing a subtle circuit. Sounds tiny. Usually the small details are where the whole mechanism turns. Breathe in through the nose, steady and unforced. Let the breath drop lower than the upper chest. Pause for a beat, if it feels natural. Then on the exhale, make one sustained tone. You can approximate it as but not like you are saying a word. Softer, rounder, lower. Let it ride the breath. Do not shove it out from the throat. Let the chest become the chamber. Some streams describe the chest as a chamber, even a hidden chamber of the heart, where vibration lands before thought can explain it. The old claim is that the body answers fast. Sometimes within the first 3 seconds, if the tone lands low and clean enough. And that part, weirdly enough, lined up with my own experience more than I expected. The first few times I tried it, I was skeptical in that very annoying, hyper-analytical way where your brain keeps standing in the doorway with its arms crossed. But when the tone settled low enough, the chest answered. Not dramatically, no lightning bolt, no choir, no cosmic special effects budget. Just a very clear sense that the body recognized something before the mind had words for it. Sometimes that shows up as warmth in the sternum, sometimes a buzz in the rib cage, sometimes a light pressure in the head. Sometimes emotion comes up for no neat reason. Sometimes there is a weird quiet, like a layer of static just drops out and the room suddenly feels bigger. Some people feel heat. Some feel almost nothing but a cleaner silence. Some feel sadness rise. Some feel peace so simple it is almost funny. Like, really? That was sitting here the whole time? You might also feel lightheaded if you push too hard or get theatrical with the breathing. Do not do that. This is not a movie scene. Keep it grounded. 3 rounds to register it, 7 to settle it deeper. 13 if you want to follow the symbolic thread all the way down. Then stop, sit still, feel what is actually there, not what you hoped would happen, not what sounds mystical, what happened. That difference matters, and this is the part people miss. Activation is not addition, it is subtraction. It does not crown the false self, it exposes it. It does not hand you a prettier mask. It starts pulling masks off. It does not flatter the false self, it corners it, which is exactly why truth often feels destabilizing before it feels freeing. It shakes the loose parts first. Old emotions can come up. Dead habits suddenly look dead. Noise starts feeling louder than it used to. Certain relationships feel off in a way you cannot unfeel. You become less willing to perform, less tolerant of manipulation, less interested in routines that were really just anesthesia wearing nice clothes. That does not mean something went wrong. It may mean something fake is losing its grip. And honestly, I think that is one reason this material hits differently right now. This generation has lived inside so much distortion that people are finally developing a nose for it. Not because everyone suddenly got wise, we still get played all the time. But after enough polished lies, enough emotional bait, enough image management, enough spin disguised as information, something in people starts getting tired in a useful way. The body catches the lie first. Then the mind arrives late and acts like it was driving the whole time. If this hit something you felt but never had words for, put that in the comments plainly. No slogan, no borrowed language. Just the real thing. Because this is where the old material stops feeling ancient and starts feeling current in a way that is honestly a little uncomfortable. The trap changed clothes, not logic. Look around. Social media, constant comparison, constant input, constant low-grade panic. A machine that studies your fears and hands them back to you in custom packaging, then calls that relevance. People wake up tired. Nervous systems are fried before noon. Minds keep looping arguments that never resolve because the platform profits from keeping them open. The fear of being judged. The pressure to respond instantly. The need to build an identity visible enough to survive, but polished enough to be approved. The weird emptiness of being seen too much and known too little. It all looks modern. But the structure underneath it is old. Keep the mind noisy enough, and it stops hearing itself. Keep it stirred up enough, and it starts calling reaction truth. Keep everyone comparing, defending, performing, scrolling, and bracing for impact, and they drift further from the one place they might actually detect what is real. That is why this teaching matters now. Not because it gives you an antique belief system to wear around like a costume, because it exposes the mechanics of a life lived too far from your own center. I have had embarrassingly ordinary moments where I step away from a screen after 20 minutes that somehow became 2 hours. Take one real breath, make one low tone, and feel this blunt clarity move through me. Like, wow, I was really letting nonsense rent a room in my head for free. Funny for half a second, then not funny at all, because you realize how normal that condition has become. How much of modern life is built on keeping people just dysregulated enough to be profitable, just insecure enough to be steerable, just lonely enough to keep reaching outward instead of inward? And once you see that, the old language about archons, false order, and trapped consciousness stops sounding theatrical. It sounds diagnostic. It sounds like somebody described the psychological logic of this era in symbolic form a very long time ago. The endless noise, the split attention, the compulsive reaction, the loss of inner signal, the sense of living beside yourself instead of from yourself. That is not just being busy. That is a condition, spiritual, if you want to call it that, psychological, if that word bothers you less. Either way, it is real, which is why something as simple as breath plus sound can matter so much. Not because it is trendy, because it interrupts the machinery. Every time you return to breath on purpose, you interrupt automaticity. Every time you sound from the body instead of speaking from panic, you interrupt the loop. Every time you notice fear rising and do not instantly hand it the keys, you interrupt the architecture that feeds on reaction. That is the teaching in lived form, not just reading hidden texts, not just admiring ancient symbols, using them where it counts, which is in the middle of ordinary life while the machine is still humming around you. And that may be the real secret these traditions were trying to preserve. The teaching is not fully in the book. The book points, the book hints, the book preserves fragments. But the actual instruction has to complete itself in the person, in breath, in the chest, in the nervous system, in the part of you that does not feel like it is learning this so much as recognizing it. That is why the truth can knock you sideways before it frees you, because what it is removing may have worn your name for a very long time, and maybe that is why the current chaos matters too. Maybe the contradiction, the collapse of trust, the noise, the exhaustion, all of it, awful as it is also forcing people to become capable of recognizing lies in a way earlier generations were not. Not because suffering is holy, it is not, but because after living too long inside distortion, people start craving reality more than comfort. They start feeling the difference between something that flatters them and something that rings true. They start remembering that an old teaching can still be aimed directly at the present tense. So if you try this, try it plainly. No fantasy, no performance. Just a quiet room, a steady breath, the tongue to the roof of the mouth, one low, sustained tone, and enough honesty to notice what happens in the silence after, because the silence after is part of it too. And if something does answer, even subtly, I want to know how it showed up for you, not the polished version, the real one. What shifted in your body? What got uncomfortable? What got quiet? What suddenly looked fake after? Put that in the comments. That is where this subject gets interesting, when people stop repeating concepts and start describing contact in their own words. And if this is the kind of territory that keeps finding you, subscribe and stay with the channel, because some subjects do not open all at once, they open in layers. And in the end, that may be the part that bothered structures most. Not just that hidden pages survived desert sand, sealed vaults, councils, edits, and centuries, but that the thing on those pages may have survived in people, in breath, in vibration, in that stubborn spark under the rolls, under the fear, under the noise, under the personality built just to get through this place, waiting for one clear breath, one real tone. One moment where the false layer loosens, and something older, steadier, and unmistakably yours steps forward. And once that happens, even a little, you do not really go back to sleep the same way again, the same way again, the same way again, the same way again.